I wasn't religious or anything, but I liked Charlie. He had guts, you know? He wasn't afraid to say what he thought, and I respected that. I went to the event more for the energy, for the adrenaline rush of being in a place where ideas were debated with passion. I was a little ways back from the stage, in the middle of the crowd, recording snippets of the speech on my phone. The atmosphere was electric. People were cheering, shouting slogans. It was like a rock concert, but with politics. Charlie was in his element, gesturing, his voice resonating with an authority that commanded everyone's attention. I was focused on my phone screen, trying to get a good zoom on his face, capturing that intensity that made him so captivating to so many. I wanted to post a clip on social media to show I was there, part of something important. The sound was so fast, I almost ignored it. A sharp pop, which my mind immediately dismissed as a microphone issue or a balloon popping somewhere. I kept recording. It was through the screen of my phone, zoomed in all the way, that I saw the horror in high definition. I saw the small hole appear in his neck. I saw the spray of blood, a red mist, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but terrifyingly clear in my recording. I saw the confusion in his eyes turn to pain, and then to nothing. I watched the life drain out of him in real time, a snuff film I was unintentionally creating. My brain took a second to connect the pixelated image with reality. I lowered the phone, and the live scene was even worse. He was falling, and the red on his shirt was vivid and unreal. The scream that followed seemed to come from inside my own head. The panic was instantaneous and absolute. The crowd moved as a single, terrified organism. I was shoved forward, then back, and I lost my footing. My phone flew from my hand, and the last thing I saw on the screen was a shaky image of the auditorium's ceiling before it went dark. The loss of the device meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was air, space, the exit. Herd instinct took over. There were no more individuals, just a mass of flesh and fear. I became an animal. I pushed an old woman aside. I stepped on the hand of someone who had fallen. The shame came later. In the moment, it was pure, blind, desperate survival. The journey to the exit was the longest of my life. Every step was a struggle. The sound was deafening, not just the screams, but the sound of bones hitting, of gasping breaths, of pleas for help that were swallowed by the tumult. I saw faces contorted in terror, wide eyes that saw nothing but the path to escape. I felt a sharp pain in my rib as someone elbowed me. The air grew heavy, thick, as if terror itself had weight and took up space. The terror wasn't just in the unseen killer, but in ourselves, and what we became when the veneer of civilization was ripped away. We were just frightened animals, willing to do anything to escape the cage. When I finally stumbled outside into the cool night air, I fell to my knees on the grass, gasping. The sound of approaching sirens was the most comforting sound I had ever heard. I looked back and saw the stream of desperate people pouring out of the auditorium doors like a river of misery. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. The image my mind couldn't erase wasn't of Charlie falling, but of my own phone recording his last breath. I had captured death. I had digital proof of the exact second a life was stolen, and I had lost it in the middle of my cowardly escape. The terror for me wasn't just witnessing a murder. It was the sickening realization of what I became in that moment. The guy that admired Charlie Kirk's courage ran like a rat, leaving behind the evidence of the crime and any scrap of decency. The recording is lost, but the memory is burned into me. The zoom on his face, the spray of blood, my own savagery to survive. That combination is my own private nightmare. The man I admired for his strength was killed, and in response, I discovered my own shameful weakness.
My name is Samuel, and I was in the front row. To me, Charlie Kirk wasn't just a political commentator. He was a beacon, a brother in Christ whose voice echoed the strength and conviction I aspired to have. I attended all his events in the region, not just to hear about politics, but to feel that energy of communion, of being among people who believed in a higher purpose, guided by God. The auditorium at Utah Valley University was vibrant, filled with a contagious hope. Charlie took the stage with that confident smile, and a sense of peace and certainty filled me. He was speaking about moral courage, about defending truth in a lost world, and every word resonated in my soul. I looked at the faces around me and saw the same inspiration. We were united, secure in our faith and our cause. It was more than a rally. It was a revival, a reminder that we were not alone in our beliefs. The sound wasn't a bang like in the movies. It was a dry, sharp, unnatural crack that cut through the air like a whip. For a split second, everyone's mind refused to process it. I looked at the speakers thinking one of them had blown. There was a collective silence, a confused pause where 1,000 brains tried to find a logical explanation. Charlie stopped talking mid-sentence. He didn't scream, he just froze. His right hand rose slowly toward his neck, as if to brush away an insect. His eyes, which moments before had shone with passion, were now wide, glazed over with an expression of pure surprise. The microphone slipped from his other hand and hit the floor with a dull, amplified thud that seemed to echo for an eternity. That thud was the true sound of the nightmare's beginning, the final punctuation to everything that was normal. It was then that we saw it, the stain. A small dark flower began to bloom on his white shirt just below his chin. It grew rapidly, a crimson tide spreading with horrifying speed. A collective gasp swept through the crowd, a sound of horror that seemed to suck all the air out of the auditorium. And then he fell. It wasn't a dramatic fall. He simply buckled at the knees and collapsed backward, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The silence was broken by a single high-pitched, desperate scream from somewhere in the back. That scream was the spark that lit the powder keg of panic. My heart, which had been full of admiration, was now hammering against my ribs, fueled by a pure, primal terror. The image of him on the floor, motionless, became the only thing that existed in the universe. The wave of panic that followed was a force of nature. Human survival instinct is an ugly, brutal thing to witness. The people who had just been sharing smiles and nods were now shoving, trampling, becoming a 1,000-headed monster with a single goal: get out. I was thrown to the side, my shoulder slamming hard against a chair. The air was thin, filled with screams, the sound of shuffling shoes, of bodies colliding. I tried to get up, but the human current was too strong. For a moment, I thought I would die there, crushed under the feet of those who, like me, had come seeking hope and found hell. The faith that had sustained me evaporated, replaced by the terrifying certainty of my own fragility. I managed to crawl under a row of seats, curled up, as the chaos reigned above me. The sound was a cacophony of fear, crying, shouts for help, the dull thud of bodies colliding. I closed my eyes, but the image of the red stains spreading on Charlie's shirt was seared onto my eyelids. The smell of sweat and fear was palpable, nearly suffocating me. I prayed, but the words wouldn't come out. It was an incoherent babble, the plea of a terrified soul. I glanced at the stage and saw the security team trying in vain to revive him. The scene was surreal, a grotesque painting of desperation under the bright stage lights that had once symbolized truth and clarity. When the sirens finally arrived and the flood of people subsided, what remained was a frightening stillness, punctuated by sobs. The auditorium looked like a battlefield, with lost shoes, purses, and crushed cell phones scattered across the floor. That place of communion had become a tomb. The image of Charlie Kirk, a man who spoke with such life about eternity, being reduced to a lifeless body on the floor, broke something inside of me. The terror wasn't just the shot or the panic. It was the silence that followed. The silence that proved how quickly light can be extinguished and how vulnerable we all really are, no matter how strong our faith.
My name is Officer Miller. I was positioned stage left, near the curtain. For me, it was just another night on the job. Events like this are always tense. The crowd is passionate, which can be good, but it also means the potential for trouble is high. My job is to watch, not the speaker, but the audience. I scan for anything out of the ordinary, someone too agitated, someone who doesn't fit, a stare that lingers a little too long. I was scanning the rows, the aisles, the exits. Kirk's voice was background noise to my analysis. I was focused on faces, hands, movements. It's a job of controlled paranoia. You have to believe something will happen to be ready if it does. The sound of a high-powered rifle is unmistakable. It's not a pop. It's a sharp, violent, sonic crack. The sound of the air itself being broken. Before most people could even register the noise, my training took over. "Shot fired!" I yelled into my radio, my hand already drawing my sidearm. My eyes didn't go to Kirk, they went up. The sound came from an elevated position, rooftop, adjacent building. My mind was calculating angles and trajectories in a split second. While all eyes turned to the stage and the chaos began to bubble, my team and I were already in combat mode, shouting commands that were swallowed by the crowd's rising panic. The terror for a cop isn't the fear of death, it's the terror of helplessness. The crowd became my biggest enemy. The evacuation plan, the security procedures, everything disintegrated into a sea of blind panic. People ran in every direction, blocking exits, creating a lethal human traffic jam. My primary objective was to protect the principal, but the principal was already down. The secondary objective was to neutralize the threat, but the threat was a ghost on a distant roof. The tertiary objective was to control the crowd, but you can't control a tsunami. I saw my colleagues get knocked over by the wave of people. I tried to create a perimeter around the stage so medics could get through, but it was like trying to build a dam with your bare hands in the middle of a flood. What I saw that night will haunt me forever. It wasn't just the sight of Mr. Kirk bleeding out on the stage, though that was horrific. It was the sight of absolute desperation in people's eyes. I saw a father trying to shield his young son, only to be swallowed by the mob. I saw people trampling others without a second glance. The sound was no longer individual screams, but one continuous, formless roar of pure terror. My gun felt useless in my hand. Who was I going to use it on? The shooter was gone, and my enemy now was fear itself. The frustration and rage I felt were overwhelming. We failed. I failed. My job was to prevent this exact thing, and I failed in the most spectacular and public way possible. When reinforcements arrived and the situation started coming under control, the scene was one of devastation. There were dozens of injuries, not from the bullet, but from the desperate escape. The stage, which was meant to be a symbol of power and discourse, was now a bloody crime scene. I stood there, amidst the wreckage, the radio crackling with information, but my mind was somewhere else. I replayed the moment of the shot over and over. The sound, my reaction. Was there something I could have seen? A sign I missed? The responsibility weighed on me like a concrete slab. That single sonic crack didn't just kill one man, it shattered the sense of safety for thousands of people. A cop's terror isn't the bullet with your name on it. It's the bullet you couldn't stop. It's the chaos you couldn't contain. It's the silence after the tragedy, when all that's left is the echo of your failure. That night, I wasn't a protector. I was a helpless witness to savagery and death. And that is a far more terrifying truth than any sniper hiding on a roof. The sound of the shot was fleeting, but the silence of my failure will be eternal.